Welcome to another edition of Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I'm ready to talk personal game or game personal or personal or game or whatever. With me, as always, is my untouchable Jessica Lewis.
Aw, I'm your untouchable? This is so special.
That means you're about to get voted out.
I know.
Or I am.
So much trouble now. Thank you. Thank you.
And today our guest is Ovi Kabir from last season of Big Brother.
Yes.
Hey, David. Hey, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me on today. I'm super excited. Never done this before, but I think it's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. We were excited that you said you would be here, and we are very excited to chat about the craziness that did transpire this week.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I have to say, I never expected to have a guest who has been sworn on. I mean, sworn at, sure, but not on. So maybe for those who haven't seen or heard about this, how did you feel about being held in such high honor that Tyler would swear on you to David?
It was funny. It was funny. And I think to a lot of people without some background knowledge of it, they're kind of confused. Like, why was Ovi like literally a first week evictee being sworn on here in Big Brother All-Stars? And why is it so serious? Tyler and both David are both my really good friends outside of the house. I would probably say they're one of the closest people I am outside of my season, essentially. And so they both know that they're good friends with me. So I think it was, that common moment where they're actually talking about me, and Tyler was trying to convince David that he didn't have the power, and he says, "I swear on Ovi." And then you see David have that, he's like, "You can't do that. Why would you do that?" And I thought that was really funny too. Like, and it's almost funny because I knew they were going on the season before. I remember Tyler telling me, he's like, "If there's anything ever serious, anything that I have to go down and I have to talk to David about, I'm going to swear on your name." It was like a joke. I never thought he was serious about it because we were laughing about it, but he followed through with that.
That's crazy. See, when you don't have kids, you have to have something else to swear on. So you were in, Ovi. You got it. That's amazing.
Exactly. It was a funny moment, and it was kind of, I think, with everything going on last week, it was kind of that moment of just kind of humor that I think everybody needed, and it was just like, this is kind of funny. So I definitely enjoyed watching that. I hope other people did too.
It's got to be nice to get a shout out from the actual Big Brother house as it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. People are say my name a lot nicer this season than my own season. So I enjoy they're talking about me in good light than worse. So
that's good. That's good.
Now, for anyone who is new to the podcast, each week we look at the player who was voted out and analyze their gameplay using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, whatever other information we can find. We compare everything about their game to a set of guiding rules I originally wrote back in 2004 and have been modifying since, including the most recent version posted at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. One thing I want to say about the rules is that so far this season, we keep having situations where there's the easy answer and then there's the right answer in terms of why someone gets evicted. Just like we couldn't simply say that Janelle or Kaser were voted out just because they came in as big threats. We also can't just say Bayleigh was voted out due to the various micro and macro aggressions that we've been seeing all over the place. It's possible for more than one thing to be true at the same time. Bayleigh can definitely be the target of conscious or unconscious racism while also having made mistakes within the game. The thing is, I can't have a rule saying don't be in the house with a-holes because it's not something a player has any control over. Though I would suggest production enact their own rule of not casting a-holes, just a little suggestion there. But someone asked me on Twitter not too long ago how such things are addressed in the rules. And as I said to them, the rules stand on their own for all players. Unfortunately, some people have a steeper hill to climb to follow the rules because of bias from other players in the game. And that's the reality of where we find ourselves this week. And we'll see that when we get into the rules, I think.
I think what people need to be mindful of is everyone, when they come into any game like this, whether it be Big Brother or Survivor, you come in with your own baggage and you come in with who you are as a person. And unfortunately, if there are certain components of your personality that shine through when you're out presenting yourself to the world on national television, that's something that you have to deal with both in the game and also after the game. And so it's an unfortunate component of situations like this, because you are who you are, but you're also playing a game with other people who are also themselves. And sometimes these things clash, and we then watch it on television, and in this case, live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I kind of compare it to some folks to, so when you're going to a new school, right? You're trying to figure out, like, how do you fit in? How does this work? But imagine everyone's a new kid in this school. So everyone's clinging into these small commonalities that you don't even realize. And a lot of times, physical appearance is the first thing that you attach yourself towards. And so we see that in the Big Brother house, but at the same time, it's a little different in school because you're playing for $500,000. So maybe you might not, you might have that understanding and awareness in the back of your head that you are playing on certain like biases, commonalities. So you shouldn't do that in the real world. But in this game, this can benefit you many times if you're in like the majority. So we saw that play out this week for sure.
Yeah.
And Jessica, I would add what you said. You come in with your own baggage. You also come in with the baggage of everyone else.
Yes, 100%. For sure. Yeah.
So,
and that's what makes it so difficult to end up. I think when you're living in a space like this, and I was not in a house where you're locked in with people. I mean, at least we were outside and it was a little bit different, but I can imagine that those types of tensions can really build, and not that any of it is acceptable, but that it, I think, can end up becoming progressively worse the longer that you're in that space.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've had this conversation with some other Survivor players, and like the differences between Big Brother and Survivor, while there are like a lot of similarities, but in Survivor, and correct me if I'm wrong too, is that first foremost, you're kind of worrying about your own your life in there, because you're starving on the island. You're trying to find food. You're finding shelter. It's difficult to be very petty and have things come out in the beginning parts, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're trusting whoever, because you need to have them help your life survive on this island. In Big Brother, though, you have those comforts afforded to you. So you are able to kind of right away, you don't worry about those type of things. You just kind of, and so we see that come out. In Survivor, you don't have the luxury, or I should say, maybe there's other things you're worried about. In Big Brother, not so much. And the game being longer, these feelings develop and become stronger and stronger as they go. And the live feeds also show everything.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's something that is lost in Survivor, but I do think that the atmosphere is definitely different. I mean, the first night that we were out there, it was torrential rain, and everyone thought that we were going to just like freeze to death. We had no shelter, and it was awful. And we all just huddled like kittens to try to keep warm and try to keep dry as much as we could. And that was, I mean, people had their heads in each other's laps, and everyone was just kind of, in a ball hanging out together, and nothing mattered. I mean, it didn't matter who you were, and nothing. It was just like, we want to be warm, and we're all going to huddle together and try to just protect each other and keep each other safe. And I do think that comfort level when you're in a house definitely can make you feel a little more comfortable acting out in certain ways or carrying on in certain ways, because you're not dealing with those survival components.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Now, before we actually get to the rules in Bayleigh, there are several things to discuss about this week in general. We just really discussed part of it. But Ovi, I want to start with a couple tweets that you sent maybe a couple weeks ago, mentioning that you gave David advice to prep him, including that he should watch old seasons, not act like he didn't know the game, and not throw Tyler under the bus. And at the time, as you said, we are unfortunately 0 for 3.
Yeah. You bring out the receipts, David. And again, I try to tell someone's like, I find that really suspicious that you would actually write out all three of those things on a notepad. It was more of a joke in that sense. Like that wasn't the three, and the joke went over some people's heads, so that was kind of funny. But David gave me a call before the season started and let me know, like, he trusted me enough to say, hey, I'm going to be on the season. And we had a kind of an understanding that we felt maybe somebody from Camp Comeback would come back from there. And if it was one of the guys, it would be either, myself or David. And so either of us I think it was kind of like an unsaid thing. We'd give each other a courtesy call so that the other person wasn't waiting, next to the phone. Because y'all know, how this works. Sometimes they'll ring you along, but they'll let you know last minute that you're not going to be on it, or they're like, hold on, they don't let you know until last minute anything, especially with this season. So when he told me that, I was already prepping a lot just in case, being prepared as much as I could. And David's one of my good friends, so I was super happy that he got the chance. So I kind of pivoted and tried to throw everything I had over towards him. But we operate a little differently. I'm very to the books. I will watch all past seasons, strategize. This competition happened on season 12. Maybe they'll redo it again because it's a historic competition. Let's see how's the best way to play that. Let me do slide puzzles again. All this type of kind of Spencer Bledsoe type of survivor.
Right.
I try to take that idea into here. So I sent David probably a good Word doc of 10 to 20 pages on hey, this is a breakdown on potentially everybody who could be on this season. So here's a read up. It's a little light nighttime reading.
Mm-hmm.
David operates a little differently and wanted to go more gut style. But so his preparations, I think, were a little different than what I was hoping for. But again, he has made it to the level he has. And if anything, I think David has been and a fun anomaly in this season that a lot of people didn't expect it to be, but he's kind of being the first person to move the season along.
I like that fun anomaly. That's good. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So
that is my description.
yes.
But I like that you created your own set of rules for him. Look at this.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
It's
20 pages
material.
of, hey, David, this is what you should do.
Well, here's the fun thing is that, I don't pretend to say my knowledge is super high on this stuff. I just like to study on this stuff a lot. So I try to bring in other people who I thought would help. So past Survivor winners, I try to bring them in and be like, hey, because you guys played on Winners of War. And so some of my buddies were on this past season and asked them, what were things that you prepared for a returning season? What is it? How is it so different? And so they were really cool about sharing as much knowledge as they could. And I just had to send a Wendy's coupon that was the payment for it. And we were just trying to take that knowledge and kind of pass that along. So I did that with David because we were both we both went out when we did, and we really would want to see each other succeed. And then similarly for Tyler, we did a different type of prep because Tyler doesn't really need that much help to be good at the game. He's naturally very good at the game, but he was one of my good friends who gave me a call and told me, hey, I'm going to be on the season. And so okay, dope. And so we kind of strategized from there too.
You gotta set yourself up for a nice little coaching business here,
Oh yeah. We'll take credit to see how far they go. And then we'll be like,
that's
us
perfect.
all along.
Yes, that can be your selling point. If they do incredibly well, you can be like, see, look at they did to the OV school before they went out there.
Exactly.
Right.
What did they say? If you can't teach a coach or something, if you can't play the game, just go to coaching.
There you go.
So example right here. But no, I don't take any credit for their success. They, I think, have pushed themselves along and they've gotten themselves in tricky situations, both Tyler and David. And I think we'll talk about some of those tricky situations this week. But I think to their credit, they've navigated it in some better ways than others, but they're still in the game.
Right.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Tyler, I'm not the first to say it, so we're just jumping around here at the beginning part.
Wait, we're jumping around?
Before we get to the rules, you can't jump around at the rules. This is the free flow part.
Okay.
So I'm not the first to say it, but if Tyler had really wanted to help Bayleigh and Davon, instead of trying to quit, and I know there were other things going on in his mind, but he should have tried to get Christmas to backdoor Danny or someone else. Then all three of them could have stayed and worked together in the game. And I just, and this is part of the reason that some people are, and this is a difficult thing for you to answer, Ovi, but, some of the people are questioning, did he, misuse the movement? Did he claim something when he was really just doing it for himself? And I'm not going to, try to pass judgment on that. This isn't why Tyler lost. But I just don't understand why he didn't try to push her so that they could all work together.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid question. I've seen a lot of people bring that up, and it's some people kind of want to throw it down and say no, this wasn't his intentions. But I think it's important that we talk about it, discuss it, because it's what happened. And I try to take off my lens because Tyler is one of my good friends, but I always say that I'm going to be the first to call my friends out when they're in the wrong too. And so I've had these discussions before about it, and I think in this instance, Tyler was, I think, genuine when he initially had that conversation with Devon and Bayleigh, where he was talking about, and I don't know if he used exactly the verbiage movement, but I know it was inferred, and everyone understood seeing the conversation where he said he'll sacrifice his game so they could stay in the game because they're in here for a bigger reason than he is. And I think that he said that a combination of one. His first main reason was he didn't really want to be there anymore. It's been known for a few weeks that he has just not, this isn't the game he wanted to play. And Tyler is very removed from his year when he played Big Brother 20. He's a different person and he doesn't enjoy what the game entails. And also he is aware to know what the game has done to other people in the sense that like he's made it far because of the way he looks as well as people who didn't get that chance to. We've talked about that a lot. And I think in that time that he wanted to, one, leave the game just because of personal reasons, go back to Angela. But two, I think he did believe that they should have a better chance to be in here. And I don't think in the beginning that was his intention to weaponize or try to use it as a game move. However, he shouldn't have brought that up in the first place if that wasn't his true intentions to go towards. I think it was more of an afterthought. And we see that kind of in his conversations afterwards when he figured out the veto wasn't going to be played and did not inform Bayleigh and Devon, or to your point that when he realized his initial plan wasn't going to go through, he didn't try to backdoor Danny. And I think that's what people are really frustrated about. And again, too, I think they're valid in being frustrated with that. But it's also not a black and white issue in the sense that there are a lot of – it's a complex thing. It's a gray area, I say, that you can't label somebody just specifically on that interaction. I think this is something he's going to have to come out, take accountability for, and have that conversation about what his true meaning was and whatnot. So that's kind of my take on it. Again, I don't think Tyler was in the right whatsoever about that one, but I also do hope that people will give him a chance to come out of the house and kind of talk about what his mind was going on and really what happened. Because I do think there was interference with he would have gone through the plan if he could have, but it wasn't his first agenda of helping Devon and Bayleigh. His first agenda was trying to leave the house, and I don't think that was allowed. Sorry, that was my long tangent about that.
No, I think you addressed a lot of great points in there, and I like the term interference because I do think that there was some genuineness at the onset with the initial conversation that he did want to support both Davon and Bayleigh, and that was how it ended up coming across. But it was more wrapped up in the I want to leave the house, and I think in the situation he found himself in is he wants to help these two individuals. And at the same time, the person who put them on the block is his other, it's untouchable. This, it's his other half, if you will, in the game. And so trying to convince her to go along with his plan, and it didn't benefit Christmas. It's one of those situations where I think a lot of things were working against the idea of it from the start, and then going to Christmas and trying to convince her of this, and then her coming back to him with information she had been told. It was like everything just kept swirling, and it just was getting worse as it was moving forward. And the real thing just was, I think, got lost. I do think that Tyler was wanting to leave, and the way that he went about it was probably incorrect and has now been interpreted to have been the wrong choice of words. And then at the same time, it's the wrong time. I mean, if he wanted to leave, he could have just said, I want to leave, period. And that's what I'm doing, and not tried to wrap it into this other component, which then allowed Christmas to kind of flip it back on him. And it just turned into this whole cycle.
Exactly. I think it's kind of like, oh, sorry, go on, David.
No, go ahead.
Kind of just like, when you do like mathematics, like you have a certain order of operations. You have to go through your division, your multiplication, then other things. And I think Tyler went through the wrong venue. He should have gone to Christmas, talked to her about this is his thoughts. He wants to do this. And if she's cool with that, because that is his closest ally. And he really did hurt her game by doing this. He hurt everyone's kind of game by doing this. And if she's okay with that, then bring this up with Devon and Bayleigh. And I think him kind of going the backwards way, he was selling, he was writing a check that he could not go through with. And he should have been more aware of that. And I think he was in a different headspace where he just was unfortunately not thinking before he spoke. And this is what happens when you do that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, even if he had tried the thing that I suggested of trying to get her to backdoor Danny, I'm not sure if Christmas would have changed anything. No matter how much he would have pushed for it, because Christmas is the type of player, and I think the type of person who wants things her way. And once her mind was set, that was it. She really appears to have no consideration for what others might think in those situations. And she's too caught up in her own world. You know, we saw this not only in her decision making, but in the way she behaved afterwards, crying, acting like she was the victim after the nominations and veto ceremony and so on.
I hate that.
Yeah, that was a bit much to really take in, because I thought it was interesting that everyone kind of kept reminding her that you were the one who made this decision. And when she was being spoken to by the individuals who were put up on the block, they felt like they needed to support her, even though they were the ones that really were in the place where they should have been upset. And, you know, she should have been the one comforting them. And that's not what was happening. And it was a very strange thing to watch. And then also listening to her justifications where she had no other options and this was the only one. And it was the hard choice and she had to make it. It's not true. There was other choices that could be made. There was other things she could have done, but she was trying to make it appear as if she had no choice and that this was it for her.
100%. I think it comes. Oh, sorry, David. I keep cutting you off. I think.
No, I didn't say anything. No, you're good.
You know, Christmas talks about, you know, the team, the alliance. We need to go with the alliance. And I think she was so wrapped up and thinking that she's doing this for the team, that the team is going to back her up with this decision. But they were like, this is on you. You know, you made this decision yourself. And I think Christmas did not expect that. And yeah, my biggest pet peeve, especially even when I was in the house, like when I got nominated, like the HOH crying, be like, I'm sorry. Like, this sucks that I had to do this. Like, if this sucked so much, you didn't have to do this.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like, if there's anybody who had power at all this week, like, this is on you. Like, don't cry. And that's frustrating. And I think it was, you know, you see the other house guests being like, at your point, Jessica, is that they're like, well, you know what? They're allowed to be upset about this decision. Like, they don't have to be okay with this decision. And you have to be fine with letting them be upset at you for this decision. That's like the, you know, that double-edged sword of being HOH. Everyone knows that. You can't have, you know, you can't choose your cake and eat it too, you know?
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of kind of like owning your moves. Like, if that's something that you wanted to do, then you should own it. And you shouldn't be blaming other people for it. And you shouldn't be discounting the decision you made. I mean, this is the decision that you made. Own it and own up to it and say, this is what I did and this is why I did it. And don't try to turn it into something that it's not. And don't try to act as if it was this emotional thing that you had to get through in order to do this. She really did have all of the power, as you know, HOH and the veto, and these were the continued decisions that she made. So either own it or don't do it in the first place.
Right. And then, you know, the way she behaved when Davon and Bayleigh tried to explain things to her was just incredibly self-centered and childish. She not only was speaking to Davon in a condescending way, but then she just had to get in the last word. You know, Davon's walking away and she's like, and one more thing, and one more, you know, she just couldn't let her walk away. Then she planted herself in the kitchen so she could keep making comments at every opportunity. And, you know, and then of course there's the this and the this and yeah, it was just preposterous.
Exactly.
It was a lot.
You know, I'm always a big proponent that you're going to catch a lot more honeys with, you know, or a lot more bees with honey than vinegar. And Christmas did not follow through with that. She just wanted to fight fire with fire. And it's at that point, you know, even if you are in Christmas, if you're in Christmas's position, you are upset that they're upset at you, even if you feel everything that you feel, you have to have that awareness and understanding that, like, whatever you say right now is not going to make things okay. Just, you know, take it. You know, you are the HOH at this moment. Let them be upset at you. You can't be on the block. Let them vent if they need to vent, and just let it be. You know, don't try to antagonize the situation. And I just don't. I don't see that, you know, soft touch with some of these HOHs that we've seen this past this season.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because this is a decision that the HOH has to deal with later, right? Because one of those two people will still be in the house. So however that person is treated during their time on the block could potentially affect the HOH later when they're no longer the HOH. And so I always find it fascinating that just because you're the HOH, it doesn't mean you will be, I'm going to use the term untouchable again, even though it's the wrong, use of the word later, that you could be put on the block and you could end up being put on the block because of how you were during your time as HOH. And it's just, so to me, it's really, there's no point in behaving that way. When you've made the decision, let them talk to you, let them vent to you, listen to what they're saying, because then perhaps later they won't be upset with you and they won't necessarily want to put you on the block, because they'll have a better understanding of why you did what you did, as opposed to just being angry about the whole situation and feeling hurt, as opposed to understood.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, she has had a severe case of HOH-itis. I mean, just a huge case of it. One of the worst ever, I think.
Well, I loved it when she said she was going to lock the door too.
Yeah.
Like she's really like, that's it. I'm locking my door. It's over. And then she came back to the kitchen anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, she had to get in that last word.
I know.
She can't let anyone else do it. So.
And it just sucks. Oh, sorry, go on.
Nope.
It just sucks because, like, when you break it down, and some people will still disagree about it. When you break it down, what Christmas did, putting these two girls on there, whether I liked it or not, it was smart for her game because they weren't part of her alliance at that point. They weren't really. She couldn't really trust them as much. And even though they weren't going for it, she would have made that move, and she would have been in a good position with Danny, Nicole, Code, all of them. And so. Then she has to go on and go further to antagonize both of them, because one of them is going to stay here. One of them is going to be in jury next week. It's just, when you make your move, I think to your point, just you have to own it. And I think they would have been fine. I think they even talk about if this is a game move, then that's a game move. It is what it is. Like, you just let us know that this was the best decision for your game at this point of the, Big Brother time, and own that instead of trying to make excuses of why you had to put them up.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. Is there anything else either of you want to discuss before we get to the rules? I realize we're already, a solid 25 minutes here before the rules, but there was a lot going on this week. Let's face it.
There is a lot. I would like to reference, just as far as like the HOH being mindful of what could happen later. I do think that what we saw Nicole Franzel do with the prize that she gave the $5,000 and took the punishment is an interesting, I think, game move, because she's mindful of that nice gesture being done to someone and how that could potentially affect things later. And obviously it did have an effect, so I think that's somebody that's kind of thinking long term, at least in that particular situation.
Yeah. I mean, I'll make that trade every time. You give me $500,000, and then a few years later, I'll give you $5,000.
Right.
She basically just took like some of the interest and skimmed it off.
Yeah.
It's
just such a smart move, and I point to people that so many people are not fans of Nicole Franzel, especially on Twitter and things like that. But there's a reason she's on the season. She is an all-star, and she is really smart in the way she plays the game. All personal things aside, she did a smart move in that way, as we saw, and kind of starting to curry favor with the jury. It's kind of a move I, point to, like in Survivor, like damned if you do, damned if you don't. When people, it's the loved ones visit. You win the competition, do you give it up and take it, or do you try to give it to other people? This is kind of a smaller extent of that, but Nicole used one of the few times we see in Big Brother, because there's not many luxury competitions where you can get money or anything like that. She used that to advantage, because these people have money already. They're getting paid good amount of money to just show on the show. That $5K is not going to mean anything if she can win another $500, $350 after tax, all of that together. So to David's point, it's just interest.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to the rules. Bayleigh came into this season of Big Brother knowing much more about the game than her first time, but she still ran into a number of difficulties along the way. Some of them were due to the actions of those around her. Some were due to problems with her own game. As I said earlier, it's possible for both things to be true, and that is certainly the case here. Let's sort through it all and find out which aspects she could control and which she couldn't, as we figure out why Bayleigh lost. The first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. Bayleigh told ET Online that in her first season, and this was before, pre-game interview, in her first season, she didn't really know the game or the strategy. But for this time, she did, and said her strategy was to align with the strongest group of people, then stick to the middle of the alliance, not the leader, not the weakest link. And then around 3/4 of the way through, she would have to become a competition beast and win her way through to the end. Now, I'm going to ignore that last part because, first of all, comp beasting to the end is not really a strategy and also not realistic.
Sounds good, though.
Yeah. And second of all, yeah, she never got to that point. So we can't even judge her on that. You know, she could say it ahead of time, but yeah, didn't get there. But for the first part, she did indeed try to align with the strongest group of people in the Slick Six. Plus, she had a pregame alliance with Janelle, thought she was good with Christmas. But the problem was that none of it came together for her. And no matter what the Big Brother announcer guy might have said yesterday, the Slick Six were never a powerful alliance. They were a farce from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like the cover story for the actual alliance that was running the house. That's all that was. Yeah.
So Cody said when the Slick Six formed that it was a good alliance to have, but that wasn't where his loyalty was. Bayleigh told EW in a post-game interview that it didn't feel right because they didn't seem to be a priority and some members just weren't interacting with them, although they were openly meeting with others. Now, I have to wonder, how much of this is 2020 hindsight on her part, because earlier it seemed like she didn't want to go against members of the Six. And, that was one big reason that she didn't outwardly join up with Janelle and Kaser. As I tweeted last week, Bayleigh said Kaser didn't know the game she was playing. Unfortunately, Bayleigh didn't know the game she was being played by. She told Mike Bloom that Kaser's reads were really accurate in retrospect, other than thinking Christmas was on his side, which is obviously something Bayleigh thought as well. She even further told Mike that she couldn't promise Janelle and Kaser she'd go after Tyler, Danny, and Cody, which goes back to my point that perhaps she didn't realize exactly that the Slick Six was a slick fake.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting that she put so much faith in Christmas because of the interactions they had in the house. And I know that it's something I'm not as... I can relate it to Survivor only. One of the components that we point to a lot is who do you sleep next to usually gives people a good indication of who you're playing the game with. And it sounds like she and Christmas were sleeping near each other, but also they were doing other things together, doing their laundry together. They were talking a lot. And so I don't know if she was just more comfortable with Christmas, and because there was that comfort level that then she also felt like they were also playing the game together more than they actually were. Unless, Christmas was just really good at faking it. I'm not sure. But it did seem like she put a lot of faith in that relationship, which is interesting because that wasn't part of the Slick Six, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yes.
So even she was kind of suffering from the thing that she was realizing about the Six Slick. What is it? Slick? I can't even.
Slick Six.
I can't say that word.
Six.
That group of people. But so she was kind of even doing the same thing because she was talking about how it didn't feel like it was that important and that people weren't really communicating that much. However, she seemed to be spending a lot of time communicating with somebody outside of that group too. And so I don't know if she ended up putting too much faith in someone who wasn't even in part of her alliance that ended up causing it really to be detrimental to her, as we saw, because the information she was sharing with Christmas was being shared and being part of the reason why Christmas put her on the block.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I think it's unfortunate in these type of returning seasons. Sometimes we see that a lot of things are lined up before the game even starts because of the pre-gaming, and so there's certain connections that no matter how much you build in the game, you're not going to break through because people already have a set form there. So that coupled with, because her and I don't think Christmas at all talked prior to the game, from my understanding, that was kind of the first time they were getting to know each other. So that trust level was already low. There was no pre-gaming between those two, while Christmas already had connections across everybody else there. So I think that was kind of where Bayleigh underestimated how those prior connections and pre-gaming would affect the game, one. And then two, I think it was just that I put a lot of credit into Danny as well. I think Danny really made Bayleigh and Devon feel distrust the allies they probably shouldn't have distrusted, and made him feel good with the allies he probably shouldn't have. And Danny and Nicole F did the same thing with Janelle and Kaser, with Nicole Anthony. You know, they were able to put these little seeds of doubt, and for whatever reason, I think Bayleigh and Devon too trusted Danny with that, some information, and then Christmas got involved as well. So it's so tough when you're in that house, you know, because you got blinders on, you see just tunnel vision, and you think that when somebody's trying to help you, you're thinking like, well, no, they're not like they might try to be helping them, but their perspective is wrong. I already know they're getting played, but before you know it, you're getting played too.
There are some I'm sorry. There are some very interesting people in the house that are very good at planting those little seeds. I've noticed where it just takes one little nugget, one little comment, and then it just gets the wheels spinning. Some people are very good at it in the house, Danny being one of them. And I do think that people are starting to catch on to that. Yeah. But it's also not only is she good at planting the seeds, but she's also good at then trying to fix it later. Like if she gets called out on it, coming up with a reason why it happened and figuring out how to spin the information. So I do think that, you know, that could probably come back and bite her, as you might see. But I do think that was a big component, and what Bayleigh struggled with was that those little bits of information, I think, were putting those blinders on her and getting in the way of her seeing the entire picture.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, Ovi, you were just mentioning, you know, that they like Danny and others stopped Bayleigh and Devon from making moves. And that was the thing. After Christmas won HOH, Devon said, now we're playing Big Brother. But the problem is that too many people, including them, haven't really been playing for weeks. So when it got to this point, they didn't have anybody to play with. Their army was already knocked out mostly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And, you know, then going back to another thing you said, actually, maybe Jessica said it, I don't know. You know, the whole thing about Christmas. Oh, it was you, Jessica. I'm sorry. You know, she never was on Bayleigh's side.
Right.
And that was the part that they all missed. They kept thinking, everyone kept thinking, Christmas is on our side. Christmas is on our side. But she was never on their side. And, you know, she told Mike Bloom, Christmas and I were in the same room next to each other. Like you mentioned, we talked every single day, talked game quite often. Even until late in this week, she told me I was the person she talked game with the most, which I now know is a lie. She told me, we're roommates. You and Day are good with me. I'm not coming after you guys. So she went on to say that when Christmas won HOH, she was happy, much like I just mentioned Devon was, because they were good with her. And then she, you know, pretty much concluded that with it was a misjudgment on my part.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that's, I mean, I got to give props to Christmas for pulling that off. I mean, I understand a lot of what we saw this week with Christmas was unflattering, but also the fact that she was able, I'll just say unflattering. I'll leave it there. But the fact that she was able to kind of rope Bayleigh along the way that she did, and you gotta give her credit for doing that. She was able to make Bayleigh feel safe. She was able to make Devon feel safe. And unfortunately for both of them, they shouldn't have felt safe. And so I do think that, you know, they are realizing much after the fact that they should have listened to Janelle at the beginning and said, hey, we should all get together and probably try to do something about this. But I also think that at the time, they really thought the alliance that they were in was going to be the alliance, or was the only alliance. They didn't realize they were working against this actual alliance that was, you know, directly negatively affecting their ability to really run the house.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think that their inability at that time to kind of see what was happening around them, in that sense that, you know, we have only 2 winners on the season, right? And neither Ian or Nicole have touched a block or been in these conversations to put up. You know, there has to be some stronger alliance, because those 2 weren't in the Slick Six, protecting them in some shape or form. And so I just think they put their trust too much in some other people. And honestly, I was very disappointed, and I was really game-wise in Tyler in this week, because I felt that it was in his not best interest for either Bayleigh or Devon to go home at the time when they initially got put up. I think, and I felt like he had a strong sway that he could have taken the move to take out Danny. And I think this story is, he's underestimating himself for whatever the reason this season, that he feels like he doesn't have as much of a pull, or he doesn't feel as close to Christmas, when Christmas still considers him her number 1 ally, essentially. And so I think if he went up to a prior to even nomination saying, hey, I think this is the time we make a move against Danny, even though Christmas is very about the loyalty and things like that. I think we could have seen her being like, all right, if you're in with this with me and Tyler, if we're going to take this as a team, let's get one of them out there. And I think that was a fault of his own, because I did not expect when Christmas won this. I was like, all right, you know what? These two should be kind of safe, I think. I think we might actually see the first shot from one side instead of it's been expected this season, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, the thing is that Christmas said, you know, or decided that she had no quote unquote official working relationship with Bayleigh and Devon. And, you know, she believed or convinced herself that the duo was coming after her allies. And now earlier, you know, each of you has kind of given Christmas a bit of credit for the move. And, you know, obviously scheming and lying are a big part of this game. I mean, it's rule number one right here. So I'm not going to criticize Christmas for telling Bayleigh she was safe and then turning on her, at least not until the Why Christmas Lost podcast. But Christmas
we'll
said
get there. We'll get there.
Oh, no doubt. But Christmas said in her goodbye message that she and her alliance teamed up in the first week, so it was a little too late for the two of them. And to this I say, BS. It's never too late. As a matter of fact, you know, within rule 1, it says make whatever alliances you can at the beginning, but always be willing to change.
Yes.
And Christmas chose not to work with Bayleigh and to actively target her instead, even though Bayleigh did the right things in trying to make an ally out of her.
And I'm not saying that it was a good move. I was giving her props for her ability to string her along. But I do agree that now Christmas has put herself in a terrible spot because she has really locked herself in and I think turned a lot of people in the house against her because she just came across in the way that she did that I don't think people are going to want to get behind and support necessarily. And to your point, Ovi, about Tyler, if he really is your number 2, why is he not helping you make the decision of to who you're going to put up on the block? To me doesn't make any sense at all, that she didn't go to him and say, okay, what do we want to do this week? How do we want to play this? Because if you do have Bayleigh in your back pocket, you shouldn't be putting her up on the block. There's no reason for that at all, because that's one more person you have that you can play the game with. Even though she's outside of your alliance, great. You have someone outside of your alliance that you can also play with.
Yeah, I mean, Christmas is never going to listen to anyone else, or intentionally.
Right.
As we saw, Nicole and Danny can drop their little hints and mess with her. But if Tyler had gone in, even as her number 1, I don't know that he could have kind of brute forced her into doing it. I don't know.
I think Tyler would be the only person who has the potential of being able to sway her mind on this cast right here with everything. And I think if you know, unfortunately, if you have to do a podcast online where why Tyler lost, I think this week is going to be one of the weeks to point at, because I think Tyler lost a lot foothold. And I just think his game wasn't in that, his head wasn't in the game, and decisions he made. This was the week for him to strike. But again, we're talking about Bayleigh, so I don't want to talk too much about Tyler in a sense. But I think Bayleigh was working in a sense of this first rule, scheme and plot, under a logical assumption and a rational thought that if I'm not targeting you, Christmas, and even though you might not think we have a working relationship, there's no reason for you to get me out because I believe we have a working relationship. And then again, you think about jury votes down the line. Christmas is something that she's even talked about in the live feeds, that she's been worried about respect. She wants people to respect her game. And, vote, I think it's called win agency, essentially, just making sure that even though if you make it to the final 2, you need people to vote for you. So some of these people won't respect her game, I feel like. And Bayleigh and Devon, though, I think are people who are more apt. We've seen it in the way they voted in the past and stuff like that, that they're more apt to give the win to potentially somebody like Christmas and respect her game because they've had a working relationship with her. But now I don't think in any world, if Christmas makes the final 2, Devon is going to give her vote to her at all.
No,
not a chance.
And who knows? Christmas may get dragged there now because of this whole episode. All right, moving on to the second rule. It tells players not to scheme and plot too much and to keep their scheming secret. Now, one major part of this rule also talks about the need to avoid being seen as a duo, which was obviously a problem here because the two were seen that way from the get-go, really before they even had a chance to align, thanks to them being the two black women in the house. But even after others got that impression, the two of them ended up tighter than ever. Earlier in the game, they were, each playing at least somewhat on their own with their own plans. As a matter of fact, I think there were times when Devon questioned Bayleigh's loyalty. But as time went on, Bayleigh called Devon my best friend in the house. And of course, there was that whole untouchable thing. To be blunt, Bayleigh should have never, ever told that to Christmas.
Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, it was an interesting conversation to see play out because she asked Christmas first and Christmas was like, well, you go first and you say it. And that, I think, right there should have been a telltale sign that maybe Christmas isn't as close with me as I thought, because she's not willing to share information openly like I'm willing to. I mean, and you could see Bayleigh in that moment, really, she was just being open and she was having a conversation, and Christmas was not presenting herself that way. And obviously, I mean, I think people can read conversations differently and how people are responding to them. And if that's the way Christmas had been with her the entire time, maybe that's what she expected. But I do think the fact that she was willing to hold back and make her go first really speaks volumes, and should have made her pause and say, you know what, maybe we're not going to go down that road.
Yeah, most definitely. This number 2, I think there's a lot to break down in this rule in regards to how Bayleigh and, this week went by. But and one thing, I hate the word untouchables at this point now, from this past week. And I do think we've never seen in Big Brother people refer to two people as untouchables, in the sense that, like, we're going to, it's always been duos, final duos, or, things like that. And it always rubbed me a little wrong way, the way Christmas is like, this is your untouchable. Well, you keep saying there's other people here in this cast who are really close to each other too. People assumed already Bayleigh and Devon were going to be a duo. They were untouchables. And I think that also forced them having to work together. If they're going to view us like this, they're not going to view us like this no matter what. And we've seen this kind of the progression where people say we need to get A, B, C, and D. Well, what's the similarity between these A, B, C, and D? Most of these people have been African-American, black folks, have some sort of thing with that. And so people have already predetermined their mind. I think this is where we talk about implicit biases, that these people, no matter what, will work together. And so we need to make sure we split that apart. So I think Bayleigh already had that kind of working against her, but I also think Bayleigh in that time was hoping, and again, I don't think you should tell anybody who you're like, your duo is your untouchable. But in that moment, I think she was hoping Christmas to realize that, well, you have a pair in us. We will help you go further. Like, I don't want to touch Christmas, but I want you to know, I won't touch Devon, but I want you to know Devon and I are together. We will help you go further. And I think she just trusted in the wrong person. And Christmas used that to kind of turn her against her. And I do think, this week, why Bayleigh went home, I do think it's a part of her, and I'm going to get kind of dragged probably on Twitter on this, and I've said it before, but I think Devon has played kind of a sloppy game in a lot of different ways, and I think that definitely impacted Bayleigh's game. I think people started viewing Bayleigh because they consider them so tight and close that, like, this is your fault, Bayleigh, that Devon was kind of messy with Danny and Tyler, and this kind of fell on her.
Yeah, and, like you mentioned, there are a number of other pairs in the house, and Christmas is apparently okay with those. And I mean, at first, when I was, initially writing up my notes, I was going to say that maybe Christmas went after this particular duo because they weren't aligned with her. But then, like we were just talking about, they were. She had told Bayleigh and Devon that they were safe. So that meant that whether or not Christmas thought it was quote unquote official, they were essentially aligned, and that they weren't supposed to be targeting each other.
Yeah.
But Christmas decided that this was the duo she was going to target. Now, maybe it could have been just a coincidence that all those other duos happened to be white. Maybe. But when you combine in all those other things, such as her saying she was afraid they'd shoot her or stab her when she nominated them, it's pretty damn clear that something was going on in her head, whether she is willing to admit it or not. She picked one statement from Bayleigh about Devon being, again, that word, untouchable, and launched a whole crusade out of that, while there are just so many other final two alliances all around her.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And I know I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but that she made it appear as if she had no other choice, that this was the only possible choice. It was the hard choice, and she was going to have to make it because she was the HOH. And I don't think anybody watching was sitting at home going, yes, this was the only choice that she could have made. And this makes complete sense because she was basing her decision on that one comment, that one untouchable comment, when really that she could have used to her benefit. Like you said, David, now you know that, okay, here's two more people that I know that I can work with because I'm going to keep them safe and they won't put me on the block. I'm not going to put them on the block. I'm furthering my game by keeping them here. Instead, she flipped it and decided to use that as her reason for putting them both up. And I love that Davon called her out on it. I thought that was great. That she actually made her explain that again, as this is why you're putting me up, because it really was it was nonsensical. It really didn't make sense at all.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, you brought this up in the beginning part, David, that there are certain things that happen in the house, microaggressions, macroaggressions, and it's tough. You can't change your rules every single week to week, basically you have these certain rules. So how do these come in play? But I do think these came in play. And I think, some viewers out here probably are getting tired of, like, maybe you all probably talked about this, and I've talked about this on a lot of other podcasts, talking about the microaggressions and the implicit biases that we've seen in these house guests. But, this game is a reflection of everything going outside of it. These house guests are experiences. It is part of the game. It is part of the unfortunate strategy that's going on. And in this case, we see that the actions Christmas took against Bayleigh this week, mixed with the comments she's made about, I'm scared they're going to shoot me, and the way she acted when confronted about them and them being upset about it. Christmas had these biases in play that in her head, I feel like she just never imagined a scenario where she can work with them going further. And that's why she felt like, I just need to get rid of them now, even though Bayleigh really kind of put herself on a silver platter of herself and Devon to Christmas. And for whatever reason, she just did not want anything to do with her. And so we've kind of seen this happen in other seasons, in past recent seasons, where some HOHs make moves that are bad against their game, just because based on this idea that they have about this person, not because of anything they do, but because of who they are. And I think, I don't really know how that, goes into the don't scheme to plot, keep your scheming secrets, don't backstab and let, these things. But like eventually in the game, you have to trust somebody with some of this knowledge. And in most cases, I would say, she should have been okay being able to trust Christmas with this knowledge, because this would be better Christmas's game. But like, I just don't think Christmas had it in her to work with them at all.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the problem is there were a lot of other leaks as well. As Melissa pointed out on Wednesday's recap, Bayleigh and Davon really needed to stop spreading information every time they got something, including going to the people the information was about. The rule says right in this title, keep your scheming secret.
Yeah.
Melissa further said they always reveal everything. And of course, they eliminated the value of the information they had. I would add that it not only did it eliminate the value, it sometimes turned valuable intel into something to be used against them, which was the case with Danny. Despite what Danny said to Bayleigh, it wasn't just that, they were supposedly sketching Danny out, but she'd heard through the grapevine that they were targeting her because Bayleigh told people that.
Right.
And then, I also don't know why Bayleigh flat out went to Danny and said, I heard you're coming after me. What did she hope to gain by that? Did she think Danny was going to suddenly come clean, like this was a detective show, and the lawyer asks sorry, I've got the prosecuting attorney here, but where you ask the accused the question, they suddenly go, oh, you're right, you got me.
You got me.
Yeah. Danny wasn't going to do that, and it just revealed everything that Bayleigh knew.
Yeah.
Well, and the conversation too that Davon had with Christmas about the conversation she had with about regarding Tyler and Bayleigh's, wanting his head on a silver platter. And, it's so, you're taking these little bits of information that you think are going to be beneficial somehow, but you really have to kind of think about the person who you're saying it to. And if this person hears this, how are they going to respond to it? And maybe, Davon thought that this was going to work. Clearly she thought it was going to help her and Bayleigh's situation, but it didn't. It just gave Christmas more fuel to throw on that fire that she was starting. So the whole thing is just, it's a whole lot of gossip mongering that, you get bits and pieces of information, and then it twists and you turn and you come up with all these different scenarios. So I do think that there was a lot of that happening where people would get information, and instead of just processing it, they would immediately run to the person who they wanted to share it with, who was the wrong person. And then here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge factor in it too. And I think that they had an issue, Bayleigh specifically too, is that she just kind of threw people under the bus to other people when she didn't have to. And I get it. You're stuck in the house. Eventually you're going to gossip about people and kind of talk about things. But unfortunately, when she was talking bad about people, throwing them under the bus, whether it was David, Devon and David to like Danny, and Danny talked to Tyler, and that came back to Dave, and it came circular force, or talking about to Christmas that she wants to give Tyler's head on a silver platter. Like these conversations, even though she made small remarks about them, they're going to come back. And to your point, she was not able to keep those parts a secret and use that information to better her game.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can move on to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. And I do think Bayleigh tried to do this, certainly more so than her first time in the house. As we've discussed, she made multiple attempts at alliances from Janelle to Christmas to the Slick Six and Tyler in particular. While we also mentioned her hesitancy to work with Janelle and Kaser against the Six, it didn't seem like she was. It didn't seem like she was totally beholden to that group, even though she kept siding with them on everything. I think she was willing to try things, but then whenever it would look like she was going to get bitten, she'd retreat to that group again.
Yeah, and one of the things she talked about too in her exit press was like Janelle and Kaser and how they basically walked in with such a large target. It made it difficult for her to really want to jump on that ship because she was so afraid that everyone was already targeting them right off the bat, that it wouldn't be beneficial to her game. So she was at least trying to think through those components of it. But she did seem to be rather locked into that particular group, even though, again, her hindsight, she's saying maybe they really weren't as focused on that group as I thought that we all were. And so she did seem to be focusing her attention and energies on just that particular group, and then also Christmas, which obviously didn't work out for her.
Yeah, it's I definitely think she did better this season than she did last. She really wanted to be flexible in the sense that this rule she followed through with it, but I don't know. It's tough. Things are moving. Sometimes it's weird because I think in Survivor, things you have only like a 3-day period between voting and like the competition. So things are fast paced in Survivor, And so I think in Survivor, adaptability, flexibility is you have to have it. In Big Brother, it's so easy to kind of get lazy a little bit. And to your point, David, you mentioned like Devon when Christmas won, she's like, we can play Big Brother now. You get in this kind of like a slumber, and it's hard to snap out of it and hard to move with it. But I do think we see kind of Bayleigh trying to do different maneuvers this week. And I do think I wish we could have seen Bayleigh go up against somebody else on the block, because I would have loved to see her kind of full potential of campaign, because I just feel like she really wasn't all in it. And we see in these conversations with like Ian where she's like, hey, will you keep me to stay? And he's like, I'm still thinking about it. I don't know yet. And she, instead of pushing that, because you always know when someone says, I don't know, usually means like, I'm not getting your vote. Bayleigh's like, okay, I get it. Like having Devon on the block with her, I really think sucked probably like 60% of her motivation, energy to be staying in the game. Because I think in her head, she's like, I kind of want Devon to stay here. And she says that her goal was to have Devon go further in the game because their purpose in this game was more than the 500K. It's trying to get one of them who has the best chance further in the game and kind of make history. So, I think she would have been even more flexible and might have seen a better campaigning if we saw her to be up against anybody else.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's a great point, because she actually did talk about that in her exit press too, how she was really wanting everyone to keep Devon and vote her out. And that became her goal as opposed to trying to stay in the house.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. And it's ironic that Christmas said Bayleigh takes things very personally and doesn't let them go, because that was really Christmas describing herself. While Bayleigh did not act that way this time. I think it's safe to say that, when Bayleigh first appeared on Big Brother, she had a problem with this rule. Mind you, there were non-game related reasons she had that problem, but it was there. As she told Mike Bloom, the first time I had a lot of emotions and I experienced something very traumatic in the house, which gave me a reason behind the emotions. Now, this time, I think she did a good job of following this rule, probably better than I would have in some cases, like when Christmas was being so condescending and, doing the hand waving and that clapping and all of that. It took a lot to restrain herself there.
Yeah. I think there was only one instance, and we talked about it, I think, a couple weeks back when she was talking to Kaser, that I really saw a different side of her come out as opposed to what we've, I think, become very accustomed to. She does seem very, very even keel, and she's very good at listening. And what I loved about her on this season is someone could have a conversation with her, and if it was going to have an emotional effect on her, she removed herself. She's like, I'm just going to take a moment. And I really liked that because she was processing it and realizing, I don't want to make the wrong decision here or say the wrong thing. I just need to take a step over here. I just need a minute. And she did that in quite a few conversations. So she definitely changed the game from what she played previously. And that I think is a really incredible quality to have, that you kind of have that mindset about yourself that, okay, now I need a moment. And she did that quite a bit.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we see like this skill be even more so in previous weeks where when David was talking to Devon and Bayleigh and trying to fact check, and Devon is so upset at this moment where she wants to go talk to Tyler and try to make sure everything, like, are you guys coming at me? And Bayleigh was the one who said, no, hold on, chill. Like, we need to let this simmer. Like, we can't let these emotions control us. And I think Bayleigh really had awareness, knowing that, and it's really unfortunate. It's really not, but I talked about this online as well, is that many times that when we see a Black woman get emotional or upset, justifiably upset, we go quickly and say that they're being aggressive, they're being crazy. This has just been a historical stereotype of, Black women. And so both her and Devon had that awareness, knowing that they don't want to not even overreact, but react to the situation. Because people are like, man, I still saw her get upset. Well, I said, I think she was justifiably a lot less upset than she wanted to show, Mm-hmm. I would have been very upset because her game is done. Her game is done right here. And she could do whatever she wants. And seeing sorry, my dog is going crazy underneath me. But look at Josh Martinez in BB19. He's literally clapping pots and pans right here. And no one's like, oh, Josh is overreacting. People are just like, Josh is putting chaos in the house. We love to see this, and people were upset in there. But as viewers, we're not like, wow, this is so bad on him. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think Bayleigh and Devon understood that if they act in a way that is what I would consider justifiably upset, people would look at that as an overreaction, because Bayleigh has been perceived like that in her past season as well as this last season of Challenge. So I gotta be honest, like David said, I probably wouldn't have controlled my emotions much, at all like that, because you're leaving the house. So why explode?
Yeah, exactly. And, she did that, like you both said, throughout the season, even starting right from having Tyler in the house, she had to control those emotions. They agreed to set old feelings aside, which was the right thing to do. She was still suspicious of him. She was still suspicious of him, which is understandable and always smart in Big Brother anyway. But, she was willing to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, talking about Bayleigh, how she didn't explode. But then at the very end, I don't know how she could go through what she did and still give Christmas a hug and then I love you on her way out the door. I'd be leaving with a big one of those.
Yeah.
And, anybody who's just listening, you can imagine what the one of those was. But, Bayleigh, just like you said, Ovi, kept in mind not only how she would be seen by her fellow players, but also people on the outside.
Yeah. And I think she did a really great job of just being a good representative of who she wants to be seen as by the world. I do think that this idea of, being on a reality TV show and what comes along with it. You have a lot of people that are watching you. You have a lot of people who, especially people with Big Brother. I mean, you get opportunities handed to you for various things that you would never expect. And I do think that you want to be perceived a particular way. And I think Bayleigh was very mindful of that she just, she is a great representation of what you can become regardless of who you are. And I think that, she takes a lot of pride in that. And she's talked openly about that, about what she wants the world to see with, where she's come from and the things that she's already accomplished and achieved. So it's unfortunate that that's something that also then can negatively affect your game, because you have to be thinking of these other levels that shouldn't necessarily be part of your game. But at least she's approaching it in a really incredible manner, and it becomes inspirational for people that are watching it and understanding it, and they can listen to her and they can kind of find a voice in her. So I think that's great for her that was the approach that she took.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 1000%. That should be a clip right there, David. Just put that on there for your feature and whatnot, and that's gonna get. You're definitely gonna get some viewers for that one. I don't want to keep going up because I know we have to get through. There's a lot of rules still.
There's so many rules.
I'm so bad at I'm keeping y'all here.
Oh no, you're fine.
This is so good. This is great.
I think you bring this up. It belongs in conversation that. When we watch reality TV from past seasons, not just Big Brother, Survivor, so much stuff. In its onset, reality TV was this show that they casted stereotypes people, and they wanted to stereotype them in the way they edited things, and the audiences have grown since then. The people being casted have been grown since then. And a lot of people don't want to show that on television. They don't want to show a stereotype that we've seen for so long, for South Asians, I only watched, brown people play taxi drivers, things like gas station owners, because that's what we've been perceived, put on an accent when they wouldn't have an accent. But now we don't want to take those roles. We want to do things differently. Same way here that it's important that I think it's the hyper awareness that we have these house guests being on the show don't want to portray that type of stereotype that's been historically shown of them. And more so, I think these reality TV shows, not just Big Brother, have to grow with this. They need to understand that you shouldn't be editing or just casting to show a certain stereotype. You can break these archetypes. And I think, Survivor has been pretty good about these in some certain recent seasons in the way that they've been casting people from very unique, just like something you wouldn't expect, and so I am hoping Big Brother can kind of take that in their casting process soon too.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fifth rule tells players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Now, Ovi, how do you think Bayleigh did here?
I think she had a really strong social game coming into it. I think she really did. I just think one thing, I think Jessica brought it up to, kind of one of her some of the faults I could kind of point out is that she kind of kicked some people while they were down, like Kaser, when she knows they're going out, and didn't really take the information that he was really trying to throw to them and work it. Because she did such a good social game with Kaser. Now it's time to benefit from the fruits that the seeds you laid down. He's going to give you information. Take that information and use it. But she didn't use, I think, her good social game to benefit her afterwards. Does that make sense? That she laid the seeds with different people, but then she did kind of come back to water them in some ways. And I think she blindly trusted Christmas because of her, that connection she had.
Yeah. I think too that what's interesting about the social component of this game, not only for her, but I think for anyone who is playing against such a strong alliance, is it makes it almost a little more difficult to infiltrate, no matter how nice you are, no matter what conversations you have. When there is such a tight group of six, it really limits what you can do. Because at that point, kind of like the decision is made as far as the six is concerned. They're the group, they're the ones running the house. So it doesn't matter what you do. I'll have all the conversations with you in the world, and that'll be great, but you're not part of my group. And I think, unfortunately, for someone like Bayleigh, who does have a very strong social game and was really incredible about having conversations with people that were meaningful and actually trying to have deeper conversations, not just about the game, but about life in general, it was really almost pointless for her in certain regards, just because there is such a strong group of people that are just holding tight together.
Yeah. She told EW, Big Brother is a social game. So for me as a Black woman, I have to go out of my way to make people feel comfortable, because we already don't have the same backgrounds or the same experiences. And I think JT from the podcasting class of 2020 summarized it well when he was on the live feed update with Taryn a little while ago, because he noted that Bayleigh connected to people socially before strategically. She found a way to connect with each person. And I think, Ovi, that's related to what you were saying, because she was getting along well with people. And again, she told EW, one thing I will say is that all the house guests are comfortable with me. All the house guests love me, and socially I thrive. I think my social game is probably one of the best. But there were two problems. One, if you're getting along too well with other people's allies, then they start to, feel threatened. And two, as she told EW, the house decided there was this difference between personal relationships and gameplay. And Christmas clearly subscribed to this. Bayleigh further told EW, I think she thought everybody would pat her on the back for doing what she did. And when the house didn't respond the way she wanted, she backtracked a little. So I think that goes to what you were saying, Ovi, about how she had these social connections, but not necessarily the strategic ones.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and it's unfortunate, but I think we're seeing these majority alliances, like, in past seasons, they are forming, and many times too, it is, if you look different, you're kind of excluded some of these things. And I think that's kind of where the implicit biases come play. And so you have to go into these games actually just going hard in there. You need to make a big move, and you need to create some sort of chaos in it, because as we saw in Bayleigh, her social game was great. And I think that's why she was able to outlast a lot of her other allies. But she doesn't have an army anymore. And even though how good your social game is, if you don't have anybody who wants to play chess with you, you're alone in your own battlefield. Yeah. So we see that happen to her, that she needed to utilize that social game, I think, earlier to kind of create an army and attack this other side. Because I think she was only one of the few people who could have amassed people to come around her and actually fight this group of 6. But if you don't have any knowledge, and if you think you are the majority alliance, that's that's your hardest hindrance.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think, there's a reason that I have scheming and plotting as the first rule. And what happened here with Bayleigh shows why. Just because you're friendly with somebody doesn't mean you're necessarily their ally. It is possible to play these games against people and still come out on the other side on decent terms. We've seen that recently a lot on Survivor. But you can't be like Christmas and just expect someone who considered you a friend to not be hurt when you target them. Yeah. Now, of course, again, this is the Why Bayleigh Lost podcast rather than the one we'll be doing for Christmas. But I do think that's relevant to a lot of what went on.
For sure. Absolutely. 100%.
Now, I do have one negative comment about Bayleigh's social game. I know you already brought up the thing with Kaser, but it goes back to a single comment she made to Nicole about her needing a couple of tries and a couple of guys to win. Now, I can't say for sure exactly how much impact that had, but it certainly pissed off Nicole.
That cut deep.
Yeah. And the truth hurts. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. It really got her talking more about getting rid of Bayleigh. She was planting more seeds with Christmas among other people.
Yeah. But again, I think it also goes to that idea that it's like comfort comes with numbers. If you know that you've got 5 people with you, it's a lot easier for Nicole to be like, well, did you hear what she said to me? And really try to get people saying the same type of narrative or spinning that narrative that, Bayleigh is someone that we should be looking out for, and she's someone that we should potentially be targeting. Because if you have a group of people who are getting behind you saying that, and it's not just you, then you can really make things happen. And I do think that it's unfortunate for someone like Bayleigh that we've already talked about. Her army was gone. Her ability to really, rally the troops wasn't there anymore. And so someone like Nicole, her troops are all still there, and Christmas is part of that group. And so you've had a lot of people from that particular, 6 becoming HOH as well. And so there's that component that's working against all of these other individuals in the house too. So I do think that, as far as Bayleigh's social game is concerned, that comment probably wasn't a great one to say, but she also didn't realize she was saying it about someone who had 5 people behind her.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, David, I think it was one of those comments that, like, if somebody else said it to Nicole, I don't think she would have minded. And I think she was just trying to find, because maybe. Because even Victor makes the same joke on her Twitter later down the line. Like, and he posts something like that. So I think, like, she was actually using it strategically in a sense that Nicole, and this is why I kind of gave her props for being like the player she is. She knows that Devon voted for her last season. She's somebody she's hoping she can kind of count on, work with, but she understands that Devon is probably closer to Bayleigh than Devon is to Nicole, but she can kind of be that second in command. If she removes Bayleigh and starts the seeds, she knows she's going to remove her eventually because she wants Devon to herself. I think that was Nicole already trying to set those moves up to get rid of Bayleigh. And I think this week was a tale of people just saw Devon and Bayleigh as such a strong duo and an untouchable that they wanted to get one of them off. And I thought Devon was be the one to go home, but Bayleigh was the one instead.
Well, and that might have something to do with the 6th rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. And this is a bit of a weird situation because first we'll deal with the duo and then, individually, but was Bayleigh really a threat to Christmas or the rest of the house who voted her out? Was the fact that she was in an untouchable duo with Devon a real threat? The answer is no. It's not like these two are challenge beasts or the new Dan and Derek. Bayleigh may have had some decent attempts at strategy this time, but she had the flaws that we already mentioned. I mean, she was leaking information. There are a number of other players who pose a much greater threat to Christmas's chance of winning. And the same can be said for everyone who voted Bayleigh out. But they're just too scared to do anything about it. So they continue to label non-threats as threats and move against them because it's easier.
Yeah. And I think that this is such a great point that as far as Christmas is concerned, Bayleigh was the least threatening person for her because she had her ear.
Right.
They were talking, they were sharing information. Christmas knew everything about Bayleigh and how Bayleigh was playing her game. And if anything, nobody knew what Christmas was up to. I mean, everyone is kind of shocked that Christmas is in the middle of all of this when they walk out the door and they're sitting there with Julie having their, one-on-one interview. And, there's that group of 6 and there's Christmas and nobody knew that she was part of it. So, I mean, if anything, Christmas really just blew up things for herself because she took out someone that was of no consequence as far as threatening her own game this week, for sure.
100%. And I think another thing that hasn't been discussed too much is, and it's not just being a threat to her, but there's such an imbalance now in the jury from men to women that I think if you're a woman in there, that's something you're going to have to think about. That are these men going to band together? And of course, it's not like that's the said end all be all, but we've seen many times juries made of primarily men, many times reward one of the final 2 winners. If it's a man, they'll win. It's only been few times that a woman has beaten a man in the final 2 in Big Brother. I think it's actually only 1 or 2 times, if I remember correctly. So it's this is something like, you got to start thinking about. And again, to your point, Bayleigh was going to be a vote most likely for Christmas if she is in jury or one of the women there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now, we have to look at, okay, was Bayleigh an overall threat, or rather, was she more of a threat than Devon? Once they're both up there, okay, who's the bigger threat? And it seems like Bayleigh was viewed that way for a couple of reasons. One, she was seen as being more likely to win a comp than Devon, which isn't really saying a whole lot. But, second, I mentioned a little earlier that some may have seen her social connections as a threat. And beyond that, what we've been talking about here, other people wanted to use Devon.
Yeah.
And they didn't necessarily want to use Bayleigh.
Yeah. Well, and I also think too, though, even if there was an idea that we should keep Bayleigh instead of Devon, Bayleigh was then actually essentially asking people to let her leave the house as opposed to Devon. So at that point, I don't know if it really mattered how much they were deciding between the two as to who was more threatening down the line. If you have someone that's actively engaged in I want to leave the house mentality, then I can understand why more people would have been desirous of voting Bayleigh out at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that she was saying that after it was clear she wasn't going to get the votes.
Probably.
After it was clear she didn't have the majority, she was
Yeah.
like, okay, everybody vote the same way so you don't get in trouble type of thing.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I will say I think one of the faults for this question. Sorry, I pretend. Don't be too much of a threat.
Yeah.
I lost my. It's because she did make comments to Christmas about targeting Tyler, and I think that Christmas viewed that as that's a threat to my closest ally, and so I think she could have maybe gone away with it if she wasn't making those threats as much. But I think she thought for her benefit, saying like, "I'm going to come at Tyler down the line. Like, don't worry about that." And I think Bayleigh viewed this as like, "This is your enemy, so this is like my enemy too." But it just kind of backfired.
Right.
That's a good point.
A whole bunch of that stuff did that. They had such a poor read on where Christmas was that they would say things, and it would get turned around.
Yeah.
Now the 7th rule says to trust almost nobody. And although Bayleigh told ET Online before the game that she knew not to trust anybody, we've been talking about this. She certainly had some issues here, such as, she had a habit of believing in people, such as Christmas. We've talked about this. And of course, we already talked about how she had a habit of sharing information when she shouldn't have, which also played a role here. I think she was just too trusting of a lot of the people. I think she saw those social relationships, and because of those, she trusted them.
Yeah, and I think that turns into the whole personal versus game move conversation much more interesting, because in Bayleigh's mind, there isn't a separation there. It doesn't need to be game versus personal. It's all encompassing. And then when you have someone like Christmas who's parsing it out, and I think that she was having a very real conversation with Christmas, and then Christmas wanted to turn it into a game move, whereas that was a like heart-to-heart conversation that Bayleigh was having with someone that she thought she could trust. So I do think that she was very trusting of particular people in the house, the people that she thought that she could trust, and unfortunately the person that she thought she could trust the most was Christmas.
Yeah. I agree. It's she definitely trusted too many people there, and I think it's sad because I think she trusted certain people and then untrusted some people, because her and Tyler had a bond in the kind of beginning. They rehashed like, "Hey, BB20 went down badly for both of us. We don't want that to happen again." And Tyler was actually very upfront with all the information he was giving Bayleigh, but then when she talked to Danny kind of led her astray and made her feel like that, Tyler actually wasn't giving her the right information. So she started to untrust that information Tyler gave her, which kind of caused her down a road that made her trust the wrong people and not trust the right people.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Now, here's something. I'm going to spring this on you a little bit here. Appendix A deals with the jury phase of the game. And some people, including the two of you, might be thinking, wait, Bayleigh was out pre-jury. Why are you bringing this up, David? But that's exactly it. While I don't necessarily think it was a huge reason, I don't think we can ignore that Bayleigh was viewed by some in the house as a person they didn't want on the jury. Tyler said at one point that he worried about it. And Bayleigh, again, this was a situation where she talked to someone, and you're scratching your head about why. Bayleigh brought up to Danny that she's great at poisoning juries.
Yeah.
And, while Bayleigh was trying to use this as a positive by saying, "Hey, Danny, if you keep me, I could push the jury in your favor," it was really not at all a good move, because nobody wants to keep a person who admits to be good at poisoning a jury.
Yeah.
What if she makes that promise now, and then Danny does something later to piss her off? No one should ever go to in the pre-jury, go to another house guest and say, "Hey, I'm great at poisoning juries."
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. That is an absolutely great point. And this, I think, is very similar to the comment that Davon made about Tyler's head on a silver platter, where you think that this is going to be beneficial, and the exact opposite is the response. And I think, Danny heard that and said, "Oof, that's not someone that we want to have in the jury, just in case," and we've already talked about how good she is socially. So if she's that good in the house socially. She's going to be that good on the jury, talking to the people on the jury and potentially convincing them of things. And yeah, it's poisoning the jury. So I do think that was something that definitely was a consideration by everyone who voted.
100%. I definitely think that this is one of the parts where I will back Tyler on, and people kind of got on him. He was just like, she poisoned the jury against me my season, and I'm worried she might do that again after he kind of flip flopped and things like that. And then you see it cuts to a different feed of Bayleigh like, yeah, I poisoned the jury against Tyler, and I'll do it again. Like, it's that's a concern definitely for Tyler, and I think other people, like, if you want to take as many variables out of the equation that you cannot see if they might make what you believe the rational decision that should vote you to win if you deserve to win, And so you try to take out anything out of this so that way you know that your game is based on that. And so I think some people viewed Bayleigh kind of giving Casey the win potentially, and the way she talks about things, especially also Devon. She's the one who gave Nicole the win over Tyler. So I think that goes into some people's heads. It's like she made a decision based on giving a returnee a vote versus a newbie, and shows that she really looked at game. Because sometimes you see people go the opposite way when you have Ian versus Dan. They never want to give Dan another win because they're like, hey, we need a newbie for that. But that didn't go into Devon's jury thing. So I don't know if that went as far as some people who thought that. But I imagine like Ian, who knows the history of the game, other people who know the history of the game, they want to keep Nicole here.
Yeah.
And one thing also I think would be fun down the line for you, this is just kind of a suggestion that, and I've thought about talking about it a bit more, but you have like the jury phase of how people who think about putting people out there, also kind of the outside jury, because the way Big Brother is played in live time. When you send people out pre-jury, sometimes they control the narrative of how the house guests are in the season. So I think we're going to see in further seasons as we go on, that's going to be kind of important to people because how they're being perceived matters a lot to these house guests. And I think some people are going to start seeing that, like, because a lot of these pre-jury people we're already seeing, they're kind of controlling certain narratives or talking about things. Spacer, Janelle, I bet Bayleigh, when she comes out in full force, she's going to be talking about things. And I think that's going to start playing on people's heads too down the line.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would rather that they not worry about social media and how they'll be perceived. I think that I know this was an all-star season or a returnee season. But even, going forward in casting, and this is something that this is not new. They need to cast more gamers, people who know the game and want to play. Survivor has done that, and it has been wholly beneficial.
Yeah.
Rather than casting people who want to increase their follower count on social media.
Exactly.
And
you can find entertaining fans. Like, it's not like it's not mutually exclusive. You can't. It's not that means that if you're a fan of the show, you won't be entertaining, or that if you're entertaining, you can't be a fan of the show. You can be both. And there's so many applicants out there. Like, it's
you don't have to take Love Island rejects and throw them on Big Brother.
Yes,
no,
I
you don't
agree.
need to.
I
want to see that. I think that's the most unfortunate thing. And again, I don't want to keep going over time and whatnot, but Survivor is so fun to watch for me, and some other, because you can see hope most of the time. Sometimes you don't, but most of the time you can see people play out like game theory. What's going to go happen in their head? It's not exactly to the level of Yul and Penner talking about it in Cook Islands, but you still see levels of them talking like, this is what's going to be how we break down the game, because these are fans of it. These are very intelligent people with a lot of, experience in different areas. We need that type of cast in Big Brother because unfortunately we're seeing such a very similar type of strategy being happen over and over again, where it's a majority alliance steamrolling without the ability of people to figure out what ways we can break through this. And it's a boring game for not just the players, but the fans too. We are seeing one of our lowest ratings of Big Brother in an all-star season. Of course, there's other variables probably there, but I also think it plays to the people we're casting and also the strategy people are using. Survivor, though, you cast people who have these type of strategies. They want to play. Even, your models, your beautiful people. These people, and you guys are both beautiful, don't get me wrong, but these people here, they're casting on here. They are like, they know the game too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's about time to wrap things up. So, Ovi, what are your final thoughts about Bayleigh?
So I've talked enough this podcast, so I appreciate y'all listening to me. I can go on about things, and I apologize to the viewers who are like, damn, I thought this was going to be an hour long. We've been here for 90 minutes. But yeah, no, my thoughts on Bayleigh. I think she's a great person inside and outside the house. I think that her impact on the game is going to go outside of the game in the sense that like people are going to view her even retrospectively even better than maybe how she played in the game because of what she stands for. And I do wish that she could have gone further in the game because I really wanted to see her kind of be able to use her social game in there. So I'm happy that she was back, and I think she added a lot to the season, but I don't know how much she could have done to not be out where she was with this type of like this steamroll of an alliance.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion that Bayleigh will not be celebrating Christmas this year. I don't. No, I had to say it. I had to say it.
Yes.
But at least she will be celebrating a brand new car. So congratulations to Bayleigh for a very fancy and expensive gift from her husband.
Yeah.
So the swaggy is incredible. But I do think that Bayleigh obviously did add a lot to this season because she came in with a lot of desires to educate individuals as to the type of person she is and who she wants to be and represent for the world. And so I appreciate that wholeheartedly. I think that's an incredible thing to do and also a very difficult thing to do. And we saw her struggle with it, but we also saw her excel at it. So thank you for that, Bayleigh. I do think that she has found a lifelong friend in Devon. So that is also an incredible thing to see. Unfortunately for her, that duo really did work against her, and her desire to be open and honest with someone that she thought that she had a close relationship with also clearly worked against her, that being Christmas. So you better be careful who you do your laundry with when you're on Big Brother, because if you do your laundry with them, that doesn't mean you can share game with them, because they might just use it against you and then use it as reason to put you on the block. Unfortunately, that is what we saw, at least the excuse being made by Christmas as to why Bayleigh got put up on the block. And unfortunately, she ended up leaving the game because I do think that her social abilities really was a concern for people in the house. And as we talked about, the possibility of her poisoning a jury, also a concern. So I think Bayleigh overall has really come around as an incredible Big Brother player. She's much different than what we saw the first season. And I think she's going to be a very incredible, inspiring woman as we move forward from here.
Now, as I said earlier at the top of the podcast, the rules are the same for everyone, but some have a steeper hill to climb. That has certainly been the case this season, and it's not a coincidence that, as of right now, no white male has even been nominated. A little bit of sensitivity training before the game clearly was not enough to undo inherent biases that some people may not even realize or want to realize they have. It's very unlikely that it's a coincidence that the ruling alliance this season looks like a jar of mayonnaise. Bayleigh knew that she had to get into the majority alliance, and she thought she was in a good place when the Slick Six formed. But the only thing slick about it was the way the other four members used this fake alliance to keep Bayleigh and Devon from making other moves. On top of that, she had good social relationships and what she thought was a safe place with Christmas, all of which got turned against her. As we've discussed, Bayleigh wasn't blameless. She was too loose with information, telling Christmas, Tyler, even going straight to people like Danny, who she'd heard things about. As Taryn has discussed, she had less room to maneuver compared to other players who had less melanin and and more allies. So when she repeatedly failed to keep her scheming secret and leaked information, it allowed others to take advantage of her, when in some cases, she didn't even realize those people were her enemies. And that is why Bayleigh lost.
Sadness.
Yes.
Well said.
Yeah. All right. Before we start to wrap things up here, I want to mention that although the rules are different for Survivor and Big Brother, behind me is a great depiction of the Survivor rules drawn by Eric Reichenbach. If you're interested, you can get an 11x17 version of this poster at tinyurl.com/DavidRulesPoster2. We also have another way to get the rules so that you, in a way, you could always have them with you. And that's where'd it go? The t-shirt. And you can go to robhasawebsite.com or robhasapodcast.com. Click on the merch link near the top, sort the store so the new items are first, and the shirts will be right there. Now, speaking of shirts, I did think there was a time when Bayleigh and Swaggy were on, and a number of us made fun of the fact that Swaggy walked around with big images of his face on his clothing. And then Jessica made me this t-shirt.
There we are.
So,
I love it.
So I had to wear this, I wear it occasionally, but I had to wear it especially for the Why Bayleigh Lost podcast.
Nice. I like it. That's perfect.
He was ahead of the trend.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Once you join, you'll see all the great perks Rob has for patrons, including tons of opportunities to interact with Rob on call-in shows, patron trivia, patron mafia, Facebook groups, and more. He recently added a live patron call-in show before each eviction episode as well. Remember to go to robhasawebsite.com/patron. And once you get to the Facebook groups, make sure to say hello.
Yes, and you should also say hello to all of us on Twitter. We have our Twitter handles here at the bottom of our screen, as you can see. So at Jessica Lewis 89, at David Bloomberg, the OV Caber. So you should definitely follow all of us. So we are, it's hard to point, but all of those. So follow us on Twitter, follow all of us, because we all spend a lot of time posting not only about Big Brother, also Survivor, if it ever comes back in the world, and just a lot of other things that are happening. So follow us all, and you get all the ideas that we think throughout the day, crazy or not, it's all good.
Yes. Now, Ovi, besides Twitter, I know you're doing a whole bunch of other things. So where else can people find you and the other things you're working on?
Yeah, thanks so much. You can find me on Twitter at the OV Caber. I talk a lot about Big Brother, but mostly other stuff there. If you want to see me and my cute corgi, who you probably heard him whine a lot during this whole podcast, you can find me on Instagram at OV Caber. And
I was actually checking him out. He's so cute.
Oh, yes, he is cute. He is the real celebrity of the family, and he always takes all the attention. But also, if you are interested in these type of things, I talk about Big Brother and its impact on the world and different things like that. You can find me on an app called TV Co. on my show, The Takeout. I go live at 8 p.m. Eastern every Friday on that. So if you want to jump in there, go live, chat about Big Brother and its impact on the world and vice versa, feel free to join me.
Okay, great. We do need a hashtag for this podcast. I do not have anything, so I don't know if either of you have anything. It's always great podcasting when we sit here and I realize that when I don't have.
What kind of things have you used in the past? So I know.
Oh, it's just anything funny that we've said, or anything.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Don't trust Christmas.
Yes.
Skipping Christmas. I'm trying to
skipping Christmas. There we go. All right. Hashtag skipping Christmas.
I love it. That's so good.
Yeah, and of course, and of course, there's the hashtag for this podcast overall, YX Lost. Everyone should make sure they're subscribed to all of the RHAP Big Brother podcasts at robhasawebsite.com/BB podcast or on your favorite podcatcher. Also, we're on the reality TV RHAP Ups feed. So if you subscribe to that feed, you'll get both this and our Survivor podcast, plus so much more. In a week, we'll be right back here to discuss Big Brother again. We are working on a guest, but we don't have them confirmed yet, so I can't say their name.
I gotta wait.
We gotta wait. So, but it will be someone good. I promise.
Yes.
But so everybody, make sure to tune in for that.
Yes, and we need to say thank you to Scott St. Pierre, who does all of the editing for Why Blank Lost, both audio and video version. So thank you so much, Scott, for all of the incredible work that you do. And thank you to Will from America for the song that you hear on the audio version of this podcast. So thank you, Will, for that. It is incredible. It's so nice and catchy. It's a good tune, so you should check it out. And thank you, Ovi, for joining us today. And stop apologizing for making it go longer, because this was great. And I'm sure everybody who's listening has enjoyed it immensely. So thank you so much for joining us. It's so incredible to get the insights of people who have played the game. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Jessica, for another great week. And yes, I echo that, Ovi. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jessica and I will see everyone next week. Bye.
Bye.
See y'all. Thanks so much.